Chapter 10. Does it still hurt? In the small bedroom upstairs, Luna knelt in front of Nellie as she carefully applied ointment on the little girl's face with a cotton swab. It hurts. Nellie looked at Luna teary-eyed. Mommy, it hurts. Shush. Luna frowned and raised a finger, placing it to her lips. Be careful what you say. I'm your servant, so call me Auntie. Oh. Nellie wiped her tears as her pair of big, dewy eyes were filled with distress. Auntie, this is the first time someone beat me like this since I was born. Her small body trembled from her sobs. Luna's heart clenched in pain as the tip of her nose turned pink. It was all her fault. She should not have left Nellie in this villa alone to make Joshua less suspicious of her. Inhaling deeply, she held Nellie's hand, her eyes full of self-blame. It's not your fault. It's all because of that bad woman. Nellie pursed her lips. I hate her to death. You're not allowed to talk like this in the future. Lips tucked together, she softly continued. She's the one your daddy likes. If you fight with her, you'll only make it difficult for your daddy. So stay away from her in the future, okay? Aura was an adult and Joshua had spoiled her all these years, while Nellie was just a little girl who had just returned to him. If Nellie could not afford to get on Aura's wrong side, then she needed to avoid Aura. Yeah, I know. The next time I see her, I'll walk the other way. Good girl. Taking a deep breath, Luna continued to apply medicine on Nellie's injury. In the corridor outside, the tall man stood, separated by the door. He listened to their conversation as his eyes gradually darkened. Back in his study, the man said softly, Lucas, keep searching for a suitable maid for the little princess. Lucas was startled. Sir, that Luna. Joshua raised his eyes and glanced at him indifferently. A woman who came with a purpose. I won't keep her around for long. Yes, sir. After the medicine was applied, Nellie laid down on the bed and fell into a deep sleep. After Luna tucked her in, she returned to the servant's room that Lucas arranged for her. The servant's room was clean and tidy, and though it was small, it had everything she needed. She took off her clothes, turned her back to the mirror, and checked her injuries on her back. Aura kicked her with all her strength, and it landed squarely on her old injury. Luna sighed at the reflection of her bruised back, and she squatted to search for medicine in the first aid kit. When Joshua pushed the door open, he saw her squatting on the ground in her underwear, her back facing him. Her skin was paler than snow, a stark contrast with the bruise on her waist inflicted by Aura's kick. The man frowned. What are you doing? Luna stiffened as she heard the male voice that filled the room. She stood up instinctively and turned to face him. Mr. Lynch. Wearing nothing but a white bra, her shapely figure was all too alluring. Her features were already exquisitely carved, and coupled with her fully exposed curves, she was a sight to behold. Even now you're trying to seduce me? He narrowed his eyes as he crossed his arms at his chest and leaned against the doorframe, eyes filled with haughty derision. Only then did Luna realize she was inappropriately dressed. She hurriedly pulled on a jacket. Why are you here, Mr. Lynch? He looked at the palm print on her red and swollen face. Does it still hurt? Following his gaze, Luna raised a hand and touched her face. She was only worried about the injury on her waist, that she forgot about the slap she received from Aura. Her cheeks still looked rather swollen. She smiled. No, it doesn't. He lifted his feet and strode into the room, sitting down on the side of the bed. Why were you recording us? He looked at her, his gaze ice-cold. Ordinary people wouldn't think of recording anytime, anywhere. He was still so alert to his surroundings and the people around him. Luna's gaze narrowed at that, though she managed to squeeze a humble smile on her face nonetheless. When Lucas and I were discussing my salary, I was afraid that he wouldn't accept some verbal promises in the future, so I secretly recorded our conversation. Unexpectedly, you then received a call from Ms. Nellie about the accident, and I followed. But the recording kept running, and I forgot to turn it off. That's it. The man walked in front of her and stared at her, as if he could read all her thoughts. His gaze made Luna uncomfortable as she turned her face away and dared not look at him. Of course, that's all. I don't like devious women. Joshua raised his hand to clasp her chin and forced her to look at him. Keep your tricks far up your sleeve. I can make your life in Blue Bay heaven, or I can make it hell for you here in Banyan City. With that, he flung her away coldly and left in strides. Luna stood there as she gazed at his retreating form at the end of the corridor, and cold sweat soaked through her clothes. Right then her phone rang. Only then did Luna come back to her senses, and closed her room door. The call came from Anne. Neil finished his class, and I sent him back. Are you not at home? Anne. Luna took a deep breath. I'll accompany Nellie here tonight. Can you help me take care of Neil, and take him out to eat? Sure. After ending the call, and raised her hand and rubbed Neil's little head. Come. Godmother will bring you to eat some delicious food. Neil flattened his lips and avoided Anne's hand. Isn't Mommy coming home tonight? And nodded. She should be. You're spending the night at my house tonight. Neil curled his lips and sighed faintly. It's so sad to be me. Hey, you little rascal. How can it be sad to live with me? And rolled her eyes, and took Neil to the nearby shopping mall. After buying some stuff for Neil, she took him to the restaurant on the top floor of the mall for dinner. As soon as he entered the restaurant, Neil saw Aura sitting in the corner. He pursed his lips and pulled, and to a seat not far from Aura to sit down. Aura was talking on the phone as she gnashed her teeth. From Neil's location, her voice could be clearly heard. I didn't expect her to not only survive the accident all those years ago, but also give birth to a daughter. Now she's sending her daughter back, just to claim her territory, to tell me that she's not dead, and to show off that she has a daughter. Since she chose not to come back herself, and is willing to send her daughter here as a pawn, how can I make it worth her trouble, if I don't kill that little brat? That little brat. I let her off the hook today with just one slap. Neil's hand that held the menu trembled slightly, as a trace of coldness flashed in those big dark eyes. Nellie was beaten? No wonder Mommy wanted to be with her, and would not return for the night. The little guy pursed his lips, and silently reached into his pocket. He would avenge his sister. Chapter 11. Not long after Neil sat down, the waiter began to serve Aura. Neil reached out his hand to stop the waiter, who was delivering food to Aura, and asked with his big eyes blinking, Hi, what's this dish? The little boy was so cute and well-behaved that the waiter could not help but stop and smiled at him. This is filet mignon. If you want to eat it, ask your mom to order you one. Neil looked at the waiter with a smile and nodded. Thank you, you're very beautiful. The waitress, in her 40s, was delighted by the little boy's compliment, and even the steps of serving food became a lot lighter. Do you want to eat that steak? Asked the frowning Anne. Neil smiled slyly. No. Then why did you just? Godmother. Interrupted Neil before Anne could finish. Let's make a bet. The boy took Anne's cell phone, and started the stopwatch. I bet that woman won't be able to continue eating in 10 seconds. And eyed him dubiously. She just started eating. She gave Neil a side eye. Are you jealous she gets to eat steak? 5, 4, 3, 2. Neil put the phone on the table, and continued the countdown triumphantly. 1. Smack. Aura, who was not far away, threw her fork onto the table as her face contorted into an ugly expression, and was shocked as Aura rushed into the bathroom in embarrassment. What? Smiling slyly, the boy lowered his head, and started eating his spaghetti. Aura stayed in the toilet for half an hour. She just had a bite of steak. Even if she ate something rotten, she would not feel the effects so quickly. The woman slumped back to the table, when she found a small note under her fork. On it was a sentence written neatly, in a clear and delicate font. The price of doing bad things. Aura shredded the piece of paper angrily. Get me your manager and find the CCTV footage. She wanted to see who was that bold and dared to threat her. I'm sorry, Miss Gibson, but the surveillance system in the store was hacked just now, and all the surveillance videos have been cleared. You trash. Standing in the monitoring room, she smashed the glass in her hand on the computer screen. The collision between the glass and the display made a loud, cracking noise. It must be Luna Gibson. It must have been 10 p.m. The black Maserati stopped in front of Blue Bay Villa. Joshua ended the last international call, and got out of the car exhausted. When he walked to his bedroom habitually, the man stopped. He turned his head and, glancing at the children's room at the end of the corridor, walked in. No one was in the children's room. You've returned, sir. Hearing the noise from the children's room, the butler greeted him. Are you looking for the little princess? Joshua raised his eyebrows slightly. Where is she? The butler sighed. The little princess insisted on sleeping with Luna, and there's only a small bed in the children's room. So, the little princess went to the servant's room downstairs and slept with Luna. He carefully studied Joshua's expression. Should I go wake Luna up and bring the little princess back? Joshua did not speak but turned and went downstairs, standing still before Luna's closed door. The butler could read his intentions, and quickly took out the key to open the door. The room was pitch dark save only a bedside lamp left lit beside the bed. His long legs brought him into the room as he looked at the two girls, an adult and a child. On the bed condescendingly, Luna wore light gray pajamas as she held Nellie, who was clad in pink, in her arms. Although the woman was asleep, her arm was still wrapped protectively around Nellie's injured face. It baffled him, but the sight made Joshua feel that the scene in front of him looked warm and homely. He laughed self-deprecatingly. He must have lost his marbles. Nellie was his and Luna Gibson's daughter, a testimony of their love. But this Luna before him was just a maid who harbored ill intentions, trying to get close to him for her own interests. After a while, the man turned and left. An extra bed will be added to the children's room tomorrow. Yes, sir. The door of the room was closed, and the sound of footsteps in the corridor drifted further and further. Under the bright moonlight, Luna opened her eyes, her lips raised in a sneer. The night passed peacefully. The next day, Luna got up early in the morning and began to make breakfast for Nellie. She also cooked an extra serving for Joshua. She would cook breakfast for him back then when they were together. She wondered if his taste had changed after 6 years. When she brought her breakfast to the table, Nellie finished washing up and came out in her tiny pajamas. Wow, there's my favorite waffles for breakfast. The little girl's eyes lit up, and she trotted all the way to a chair to sit down. What a sumptuous breakfast! Really? Before Nellie could finish her words, a man's low voice came from upstairs, carrying a hint of laughter. Nellie raised her head and looked at the man who was coming down the stairs. Aloof, arrogant, handsome. So much so that she did not know the suitable words to describe his beauty. The little girl's face blushed inexplicably. Good morning, Daddy. This was her daddy, the daddy she just met yesterday. Good morning. The man smiled and sat down opposite her. Nellie forked a small piece of the waffle in her bowl and put it in front of Joshua. Daddy, try it. Auntie made this waffle, and it's delicious. Joshua glanced lightly at the untouched dessert in front of her. You haven't eaten it yet. How do you know it is delicious? She smiled awkwardly. I can guess. The little girl then shoved a piece into her mouth. It's really delicious. The man looked at her stuffed little face. Does it still hurt? It took Nellie aback before she realized he was asking about her face. It doesn't hurt anymore. At the mention of this, she secretly glanced at Luna, who stood at the side of the room. Daddy, why don't you ask Auntie if it hurts? Her injuries were more severe than mine. Joshua lowered his head, eating his breakfast, and said carelessly, She's an adult, it won't hurt. Even if it does, it's none of my business. Nellie lowered her head and bit her lip silently. After breakfast, Joshua left. The butler took Nellie and Luna around the villa to familiarize themselves with the environment. Blue Bay Villa was incredibly huge. For Nellie, who was here for the first time, everything was unknown to her and was filled with surprises. But it was a walk down memory lane for Luna. She seemed bored and uninterested throughout the morning. There were memories of her and Joshua everywhere, and every memory reminded her of how stupid she was to be infatuated with that man. At lunch, Nellie had no appetite and only ate very little. Luna felt that she was still unaccustomed to the surroundings, since she had just returned home from a long stay abroad. So she went out during Nellie's lunch break and wanted to buy Nellie some oranges that she liked. Unexpectedly, just after walking out of Blue Bay Villa, a red Ferrari stopped beside her. The car window lowered and revealed Aura's arrogant face. Shall we talk? Chapter 12. Luna merely passed her and continued to walk toward the bus stop. We have nothing to talk about. Is there nothing to talk about, or are you just afraid to talk? Aura opened the door and got out of the car, grabbing Luna's wrist. Don't think I don't know what's on your mind. You should be younger than me, let alone having a baby. You're still a child yourself, right? A woman who has never given birth to a child, yet you're desperate enough to slave away under a 6-year-old girl, just for a salary of a few $1,000s a month. Luna shook her hand away. Then you tell me, what am I doing this for? Aura narrowed her eyes. The situation was chaotic yesterday, so she paid no attention to the woman's appearance. As she was up close to her at this moment, however, she found her face to be flawless, as if it was carved by an artist. "You're pretty, but you should also know that Joshua is my fiancé. I advise you not to seduce on him so shamelessly." Luna smiled. Did Aura consider the fact that Joshua was her husband when she hooked up with him? With their roles switched, she had the guts to warn her not to be shameless? If this was being shameless, then Aura's honor and pride were long gone. At that thought, she bore into Aura's eyes coldly. "Then what if I insist? What can you do to me?" She raised her eyes and glanced at the blazing sun in the sky. "Can you kill me right now in broad daylight?" "That's impossible," sneered Aura, as she revealed a voice recorder from her pocket. "You're not the only one who can record things." Luna's gaze narrowed. What a fast learner. "I'm going to play this recording for Joshua now. You just wait to be fired." With that, she returned to her car with a smug expression on her face, started the engine and drove away, leaving Luna standing with a frown. She did not expect Aura would come up with such a trick and go to Joshua with the recording. Still, it did not matter. Everything had just begun, and Joshua did not trust her much anyway. Aura took the recorder and went to Joshua's office in a frantic manner. In the office, a man was holding a transnational-international conference facing the computer. Joshua. No matter how Lucas tried to stop her, Aura still managed to barge in. She rushed in regardless. "I knew there was something wrong with the maid the moment I saw her in your house yesterday. I got the evidence after all." The man scrunched his eyebrows, his voice as cold as his eyes, making it difficult for people to breathe. "Get out." "Joshua." She wanted to continue, but the voices of the executives in the company blared from the computer. "Mr. Lynch, if it's inconvenient for you now, we can discuss it next time." Aura seemed to have realized something. Had she interrupted Joshua's work? "We'll discuss it next time." The man turned off the computer with a cold expression on his face and looked up at Aura's pale face. "Talk." Aura pursed her lips and pressed the play button on the recorder hesitantly. "I advise you not to seduce Joshua shamelessly." "Then what if I insist? What can you do to me? Can you kill me right now in broad daylight?" After the recording ended, Aura looked at him righteously. "Joshua, this woman who's taking care of Nellie is selfish. She has ill intentions toward you. Didn't you say you won't allow any suspicious characters to stay by your side for too long?" The woman bit her lip and softly added, "Although she does her best with Nellie, she doesn't genuinely like her. Such a person can't stay." "I know." Joshua leaned back in his chair lazily. "But Nellie is very dependent on her now. She's just returned to me, and I don't want her to be unhappy. Besides, she takes care of Nellie quite thoughtfully." Aura fell silent for a while. "Actually, I can take care of Nellie. No matter what, Nellie is my sister's daughter, and we're still related by blood." "You taking care of her?" Joshua curled his lips and smiled mockingly. "How would you care for her with your slaps?" The warm words that she had prepared were forced back down her throat. After a while the woman sniffed. "Joshua, about yesterday, I know that you misunderstood. But at first, I really didn't know that Nellie was you and my sister's child. I thought she was a fake, so I hid her." With that said, she even lowered her head and shed tears. "I'm her aunt anyway, so even if I made a mistake because of a misunderstanding, you can't do this. If my sister was still alive, she'd choose to let me, her aunt, take care of Nellie instead of letting a conspiring stranger." Her sobs were extremely loud and extremely fake, and it somewhat upset Joshua. The man glanced at her. "There have always been many who harbor ill intentions toward me," he scoffed. "When I first got together with Luna, didn't you also hide a hidden agenda? Didn't I allow you to stay?" With his words, Aura's tears stopped immediately. She opened her mouth and attempted to say something, but nothing came out. When he mentioned this incident, she knew it proved that Joshua would not act according to her wishes. After a long while Aura sighed, turned and left in frustration. "Sir." After Aura left, Lucas knocked on the door and came in, placing a thick document in front of Joshua. This information on Luna was all collected abroad. His slim fingers flipped open the document. It seems that Luna's information was real. Lucas lowered his head and explained softly. She had indeed grown up, studied, and worked abroad, and just returned home a few days ago. However, Luna was a senior jewelry designer when she was living abroad, and though she wasn't considered a master, she was still good enough. Why would such a person come back here and be willing to come work for us as a maid for the little Princess Nelly? Joshua narrowed his eyes. This file about Luna was very detailed. Too detailed. It was so detailed that even important witnesses in each stage of her life were clearly marked out. But the more perfect it was, the more it seemed to conceal something deliberately. The man frowned slightly. Continue investigating. She said she's short on money, but her annual salary as a designer abroad was quite substantial. She isn't low on money, nor is she a superficial woman. The man put his hands together and looked into the distance, gaze cold and indifferent. If her aim in approaching me is just me personally, then it's fine. I'm afraid. He was afraid she had other goals. He had a hunch that Luna was a woman who had a lot to hide. Chapter 13. There were 10 pages of information on Luna. Joshua studied the document for a long time, but found no flaws in them. Mildly annoyed, he got up and went to the bathroom. Okay, you'll have to take care over there. Joshua heard a crisp childish voice the moment he entered the bathroom, and he stopped washing his hands. The company clearly stipulated that staff members were not allowed to bring their children to work. Why were there children in the company at this hour? He furrowed his brows and followed the voice before it led him to a compartment. The moment he walked to the door of the compartment, and before he could knock on the door, it opened. Smack! The door to the compartment slammed into his forehead loudly, and Joshua hissed as he instinctively covered his forehead. Neil walked out of the cubicle. A trace of sly pride flashed in his eyes for a second before he raised his head and looked at Joshua apologetically. I'm sorry, so sorry. I didn't know someone was outside, so I opened the door. I'm sorry. Joshua released his hand that covered his forehead and glanced down at the little boy, who stood only a little taller than his knee. Although he was fairly short, his features were exquisite. He emanated a heroic aura even at such a young age. He had no interest in children in the past, but at that moment, he looked at the boy before him and thought that he should be around the same age as Nelly. Unexpectedly, he could not bring himself to act stern. The man scrunched his eyebrows slightly, voice cold as he asked, "Why are you here?" "That's a strange question you're asking, Uncle." Neil's lips curled. "I came to the bathroom, so of course I came to pee." No, he did not come to pee at all. He saw Joshua come out of his office and waited here on purpose, all to hit him. Who said his mistress could bully Nelly? Joshua frowned as his voice grew colder. I mean, why are you in this building? Who are your parents? Where are they? The man's serious look caused Neil to flatten his lips, and his tears began to fall. My father is dead. He's been dead for a long time. My mother is accompanying my sister while working and earning money. It's very hard for us. He took a deep breath and raised his hand to stop Neil. Since your parents aren't here, why are you here? I came with my godmother. Neil flattened his lips. My godmother is here to discuss business. Joshua's scrunched brows relaxed slightly. Well, what? Neil cried, gaze sweeping Joshua's serious expression with the corners of his eyes. I blame my father. Why did he die so early? If he had been alive for a few more years, my mother wouldn't have ended up like this today. He cried louder and louder, and his deprecating words toward his father grew more and more reproachful. Mysteriously, Joshua felt a little uncomfortable as he listened to the boy's berating words for his father. Could it be because he grew to love children more after reacquainting with Nelly? The man squatted down and patted his back lightly, and it stunned Neil silent. He's in a better place now. He held back his smile, raised his hand and wiped his tears. You're right, people can't come back from the dead. I hope my unscrupulous dad can be a good person in his next life. This kid was growing more and more ridiculous. Joshua stood up. It's better for children to not criticize adults. Okay. Neil knew his limits and stopped crying. He took a deep breath, turned and walked out of the bathroom. Neil, and had been waiting a long while for him outside the bathroom. Seeing the little boy coming out, she waved her hand excitedly. Here. The moment she did, she caught a glimpse of a tall and cold man behind him. Was that Joshua? Anne's body stiffened slightly. My godmother is waiting for me, so I'll be going now. Neil smiled and bade Joshua farewell before he trotted all the way back to Anne's side. The Lynch Group does not allow staff to bring their children to the office. A man's indifferent-sounding comment was heard just as and was about to take Neil and escape. Although you're not an employee of the Lynch Group, please try not to bring your children the next time you come. The man finished and turned to leave. Ha! Neil silently rolled his eyes at his retreating form. The boy's boldness frightened Anne. She hurriedly pulled Neil toward her and lowered her voice. Why did you come out with him? We went to the bathroom together, of course. And raised her hand and tapped her knuckles on his head. You know I'm not asking you about that. She took a deep breath, dragged Neil behind her, and strode into the elevator. I told you the man just now was Joshua. Joshua, the richest man in Banyan City. This entire building belongs to him. Not only is he rich, but he's also very dangerous. If we piss him off, we won't be able to survive in Banyan City. Stay away from him in the future. Neil nodded. I know. He never wanted to grow close to him in the first place. Daddy, the food Auntie made is particularly delicious, isn't it? Asked Nellie, wearing a small pink skirt at dinner, as she blinked her big dewy eyes. Not bad. Joshua lowered his head, frowning as he ate. The taste is somewhat familiar. It was very similar to the food Luna Gibson cooked back then. It was apparent that this Luna had done her homework to approach him. The man raised his eyes and glanced coldly at Luna, who stood beside him. Did anything happen today? He spoke indifferently. Yes. Luna nodded and spoke generously. When I was grocery shopping this afternoon, I ran into Ms. Gibson. She came to me on her own initiative and asked if I had sexual thoughts about you. Raising her head, she continued. I think Ms. Gibson is deeply prejudiced against me. To not affect the relationship between you and Ms. Gibson, I suggest that I come here every day to take care of Ms. Nellie, and I'll return home in the evening. She raised her head and looked at Joshua seriously. Would this be all right? If she did not live in the villa, she would have free time to take care of Neil. Luna wanted to take care of Neil, not because Neil was too incompetent that he could not even take care of himself. It was because she felt that Neil was too smart for his own good, and she would not be able to prevent him from doing something inappropriate if she did not keep an eye on him. There's no need for that. Joshua raised his fork and spoon gracefully as he spoke calmly and neutrally in between bites. She has no right to control who I allow into my house. Luna smiled. But isn't Ms. Gibson your fiancé? Mr. Lynch, there's something I don't quite understand. I saw on the news that the two of you have been engaged for more than 5 years. Why has it been more than 5 years, yet you neither married Ms. Gibson or let her move in? Chapter 14. Joshua's held a fork in his hand and paused slightly. He raised his head, and those black eyes looked at Luna's face indifferently. If I asked her to move in, then those women who wanted to hook up with me wouldn't have a chance anymore, would they? The man's words made Luna squint slightly, but after a while she smiled. I always thought that the relationship between Mr. Lynch and Ms. Gibson was strong enough. It seems that I've been thinking too much. Joshua curled his lips faintly. Even so, some people who approach me with a purpose from the get-go stand no chance. Then Mr. Lynch is very faithful and loyal to his lover, retorted Luna. It seems that I misunderstood you. Noticing that the atmosphere on the dining table grew more intense by the moment, Nellie quickly stretched out her little hand to stop their eye contact. Stop arguing. We're not. Her daughter's anxious voice made Luna come back to her senses. She quickly calmed herself down and gave Joshua a faint smile. Mr. Lynch, don't get me wrong. I just think that the future lady of the family is hostile to me, so it's not appropriate for me to live here all the time. Joshua's black eyebrows furrowed tightly. This is my home, and whether you live here or not will only be decided in my hands. Also, you're just a servant. Don't inquire so much about your boss. Aura isn't the master of this house. As he spoke, he lowered his head and gently speared some vegetables onto his fork for Nellie. This villa has always had its mistress. Luna sneered quietly. The person Joshua referred to the hostess of this villa was not her. Was it? It was hilarious to her. He never showed her warmth when she was with him, and he even hired people to kill her for Aura. Yet he pretended to be loyal and loving all of a sudden. He was just putting on a show for Nellie, was he not? Had he realized how shameless the things that he did back then were? Thinking of this, Luna smiled faintly. But isn't the former lady of this house dead? She's not dead. Joshua frowned and slapped his spoon on the table fiercely. My wife is still alive. The man's gaze was fierce and sharp. Beware of your words. They may cause you imminent danger. Luna met his gaze fearlessly. But I read on the news that your ex-wife is dead. If you say she's still alive, where is she now? The man glared at her, and his bottomless eyes seemed to burn with anger. The two people looked at each other, and the atmosphere at the table grew so cold that one could barely breathe in their vicinity. Enough! Nellie put down her fork and spoon. Her little eyes red as a hint of a sob was detected in her delicate voice. This is the first time we have dinner together. Do we have to fight? With that, the little girl turned around and ran upstairs. Joshua frowned and got up to run after her, but not before throwing Luna a cold glare. Luna sat on the chair and watched him run after Nellie's retreating back, silently closing her eyes. She should not have quarreled with Joshua in front of Nellie, but she had endured too much pain and torture in the past 6 years. Every night when she lay awake in bed thinking about it, she wanted to fly back to Banyan City, find Joshua, cut his heart open, and see if it was pitch black inside. Upstairs. Nellie. Joshua opened the door to the children's room and walked carefully to the little girl's side. She covered herself with a quilt. Her thin body laid on the bed, curled up in a small ball, and his heart melted at the sight. The man gently sat down on her bedside, raised his hand, and gently stroked her back that shook from her sobs. Don't cry. He did not know how to coax such a young girl, so he could only stroke her comfortingly, trying to make his voice soft and gentle. After a long time, Nellie's back finally stopped trembling. She crawled off of the quilt and looked at him with red eyes. Daddy, don't blame Auntie. Joshua paused. After she stopped crying, he thought the first thing she would do was to whine and complain to him. But it turned out that the first thing this little girl did after successfully holding back her tears was to plead for Luna. The man's heart instantly melted into a giant puddle. He picked her up. Do you like her that much? Yeah. Nellie sniffed as her little head rested on the man's shoulder. I like her very much, so don't blame her for this, okay, Daddy? Joshua pursed his lips. He was a little reluctant, but since his baby girl said so, he could not really kick Luna out. The man sighed and nodded gently. A moment later, he raised his hand and stroked her back. Why did you cry just now? Do you miss your mother? Nellie pursed her lips and nodded silently. Then, do you know where your mother is? He lowered his voice, attempting to induce her. Why not let me take you to her? No, Nellie shook her little head like a rattle. Mommy said that when the time is right for her to meet you, then you'll meet. She asked you not to try finding her, Daddy. Just be nice to me. Joshua looked at the little girl's face, her features almost a copy of her mother's, and pressed his thin lips tightly. Daddy. Nellie laid in his arms and sniffed. I just heard from Auntie that you're going to marry the evil lady from yesterday. She raised those big dewy eyes and looked at him. Is it true? Joshua had no response for a while, so he frowned and said, These are adults' matters. It has nothing to do with you. How so? Nellie bit her lip. Daddy, why do you want to marry someone else? Don't you like Mommy anymore? Did he not like Luna Gibson anymore? This question caused Joshua to sigh heavily. If he could stop liking Luna Gibson, he would have done so a long time ago. She had been gone for 6 years. But his feelings for her was deep as an ocean, infinite and never-ending like an horizon. It was a pity that when they were together back then, he never realized his feelings for her. The man's silence caused Nellie to sigh a long sigh. You definitely don't like Mommy. Nellie flattened her lips. There aren't any pictures of you and Mommy at home. Ever since Nellie could remember, Luna had been wearing this near-perfect face. Her 2 brothers said that Mommy's face was artificial, and she did not look like this before. She truly wanted to know what Mommy used to look like, but even after she ruffled through every corner of the house, she could not find a single picture of a woman. The man sighed and promised earnestly, Sleep tight. And when you get up in the morning, you'll see pictures of me and your Mommy. Nellie nodded. Okay. Early the next morning, Aura pushed past the security guard at the door. As soon as she walked in, she saw the wedding photo hanging in the middle of the living room. In the photo, Luna Gibson stood on the beach as she wore a white wedding dress, and Joshua was walking toward her with flowers. Staring at that photo, the anger in Aura's chest began to surge. She remembered how, the moment she was announced dead, she had burned all of Luna Gibson's photos on the pretext that Joshua would be saddened at the memory. Nellie, the little brat, just came back 2 days ago. Why was this photo hanging magnificently in the center of Blue Bay Villa? The furious Aura walked over angrily, took the photo down, and threw it on the ground with a resounding slam. What a bitch! All of them. Bitches. Luna Gibson was a bitch, and even her evil little brat followed in her footsteps. Chapter 15. I feel like eating cake today. In the children's room upstairs, Nellie pushed open the door with a small hand and held Luna's with the other. The sweet yam flavor that I tried before. Luna smiled helplessly and nodded. Okay. Both mother and daughter went downstairs, immersed in their conversation. As soon as Luna reached the top of the stairs, she saw the photo that hung on the wall beside the stairs. She froze. The photo showed how she was before. She stood beside Joshua in a wedding dress and looked at him. Her eyes filled with love and shone with the light of 1,000 stars. Joshua's face, on the other hand, was as usual, eternally empty and expressionless. Looking at this photo, Luna felt like she was being struck by lightning. She remembered how she carefully selected her and Joshua's wedding photos one by one. She poured her effort into her little project and hung them everywhere he could see. She felt that one day, he would understand her sincere feelings for him. In the end, reality gave her a tight slap. Not only did she lose everything, but she even her appearance was ruined. Auntie. Noticing how stiff she became, Nellie bit her lip and was even more certain that the woman in this wedding photo was Mommy. Mommy used to look like this. It seemed Mommy could laugh so happily. The little girl carefully observed Luna's reaction, and a trace of sorrow and grief surged in her heart. Mommy's face looked far different. No wonder Daddy did not recognize her at all. Ms. Gibson, sir said that you're not allowed to come here anymore. At that moment, the butler's helpless voice drifted up from downstairs. You're making it very difficult for me. Why can't I come here? Aura's voice was domineering. Even they can live here guilt-free, so why can't I come? The butler kept his voice steady and neutral as he answered. If you refuse to leave, I have no choice but to request Mr. Lynch to return home. Aura suddenly raised her eyebrows. What do you mean? Are you using Joshua to threaten me? Don't forget that I'm the rightful future lady of the house. If you get on my bad side, I promise I'll make you pay in the future. At the woman's words, the butler lowered his head silently and dared not challenge her. Although Mr. Lynch had always been dissatisfied with Aura, she was his fiancée for more than 5 years. It was only a matter of time before he married her. Seeing that the housekeeper was not actively stopping anymore, Aura pulled another wedding photo hanging on the wall and smashed it to the ground fiercely. This woman has been dead for 6 years, and hanging her photos would bring nothing but bad luck. Stop it! Nellie angrily removed her hand out of Luna's and rushed downstairs. The ground was full of fragments of the wedding photos. The glass panel and photo frame were shattered to pieces, and Aura went as far as stomping on Luna Gibson's face in the photos, until her original appearance could no longer be seen. Looking at the mess, Nellie almost started crying in distress. She wanted to rush over, but was held back by Luna. Luna hugged Nellie in her arms and went downstairs cautiously. With the floor littered with glass shards, Nellie, the child she was, could get injured if she did not pay attention. Oh, can't bear looking at this. Aura crossed her arms at her chest as she coldly watched as Luna carried Nellie downstairs. Hey, you little brat, this picture was hung up as soon as you came back. Did you ask Joshua to hang it? Nellie stared at her fiercely from Luna's arms. I asked Daddy to hang it up. What's wrong? Daddy said that Mommy is the lady of this house. Is it wrong to hang up the photo of the lady of the house? The girl's words once again ignited Aura's anger. If Luna Gibson was the lady of this family, then what was she? She stared at Nellie ferociously. Joshua is just placating you. I am the future lady of this family. Nellie bit her delicate lips. You're not. My mommy is. I am. Listening to Aura angrily arguing, Luna found the scene somewhat ridiculous. Nellie was just a 6-year-old girl, yet Aura could actually argue with her tirelessly. It stood to reason that she was Joshua's fiancée, the one he favored, and she could use this to her advantage and act however she liked. Why would she argue hysterically with Nellie? After all, Nellie was only Joshua's daughter. How could children control the emotions of adults? At this thought, she smiled faintly, raised her hand, and sorted Nellie's hair that was a little messy because of the quarrel. "Don't you want to eat cake? Let me take you there." Nellie was startled, but she understood that Luna meant that she did not want her and Aura to continue quarreling. She flattened her lips. "Okay." With that, Nellie turned her head and glanced at the butler on the side. "Mr. Butler." The little girl's voice was soft and waxy as she spoke. "Please tell Daddy that it was his fiancée who broke the wedding photo of him and Mommy. Tell Daddy to print 2 more to replace them." The little girl's voice was gentle and cute, and the butler nodded quickly. "Yes, I will." Standing on the spot, Aura looked at the butler's face. Thinking about how he had just driven her away coldly, the anger in her heart could no longer be contained. She rushed forward, stopped Luna in her tracks, and looked at Nellie triumphantly. "What do you think Joshua would do to me if you told him I broke these photos? He loves me the most." "Oh." Nellie nodded slowly. "If Daddy spoils you the most, why didn't he hang a picture of you at home?" Aura choked and was flabbergasted for a long while. Taking advantage of her stunned state, Luna hurriedly left with Nellie. She did not want Nellie to get into too many conflicts with Aura, not because she was afraid of Aura, but because she did not want Nellie to be harmed. Not even a single strand of hair off her head. The door closed with a resounding bang, and Luna left with Nellie in her arms. Aura recovered and finally realized what had happened. She stomped her feet angrily, her heels smashing into the shards of glass on the ground. "Bitch! Rip!" Lifted into the air by her heels, the shards of glass fell on her feet, and she gasped in pain. She narrowed her eyes fiercely at the servant standing at the side. "Hurry up and help me." The servant hurriedly helped her out. When she got in the car, Aura looked at the wound on the back of her foot carefully, frowning. Go to the cosmetic surgery clinic. She had a big cut on her foot, and she did not want to leave scars. Cosmetic surgery clinic. Dr. Zimmer. Anne and Neil were arguing about what to eat for lunch when the nurse rushed into Anne's office. "There's a patient with an injury on her foot. She specifically requested the best doctor to stitch her up." It sounded hilarious to Anne. "I'm a senior plastic surgeon. Were they asking her to perform simple tasks like stitching up wounds?" But the nurse looked awkward. "The patient is so arrogant and domineering, saying that she's Mr. Joshua Lynch's fiancée and must be treated by the best doctor in our hospital." Neil frowned slightly. Joshua's fiancée? Was that not the little mistress, Aura? He blinked and quickly raised his hand to tug at Anne's sleeve. "Godmother, you have nothing to do anyway. Why don't you let her in and stitch her up? Don't make it difficult for the nurse." She glanced suspiciously at Neil. "Since when did you little brat grow to be so kind?" Neil chuckled. "Just take it that I'm eager to please this beautiful nurse." As soon as he said this, the nurse quickly smiled and said, "Thank you, handsome little Neil." Under their insistence and had no choice, she sighed. "Show her in." She turned her head and glanced at Neil, only to find that he was flipping through his school bag. "What are you looking for?" "I remember there was a jar of salt in my bag," and was floored. Why was this little rascal stuffing everything into his school bag? Chapter 16. Not long after the nurse left, Aura was led into Anne's office. "Be careful when stitching up my wound. I don't want any scars," Aura ordered coldly before she leaned back in her chair and started watching videos on her phone. Her behavior displeased Anne, but she was a doctor above all else. Lowering her head, she began to stitch Aura's wound seriously. Just as Anne squatted down and was about to start sewing, all while Aura was watching a drama on her phone, Nigel accidentally fell on Anne. Ouch! His little finger landed right on Aura's wound. He took the opportunity to wipe the salt on his fingers onto her wound. Arg! Aura was in so much pain that her entire face contorted in an instant, and she almost jumped out of the chair. That startled Anne completely. "Sorry." Nigel quickly bowed his head and confessed his mistake. "Beautiful auntie, I didn't mean it. Just accidentally fell." Aura's facial features were distorted with pain as she stared at Nigel viciously. "Careless. That's it. It was an accident." Nigel pursed his lips and looked at Aura with those pitiful doe eyes. "Pretty auntie, if you're really angry, you can fall on top of me." Aura's eyes were round with anger. She was an adult. Was she going to fall flat on this brat boy? "Pardon me, this is my godson. Children like to fool around," and apologized in a low voice as she began to disinfect Aura's wound with alcohol. "It'll hurt a bit, so please bear with it. Aura's screams suddenly sounded more intensely in the office, and finished sterilizing the wound, and began to suture it. Aura still looked down at her phone, her attention on the show. She was nearing a pivotal moment in the plotline when her cell phone suddenly beeped that the Wi-Fi password was incorrect. Aura frowned. What's going on? Beside her, Nigel cautiously leaned over. Pretty auntie, let me help you get the password. As an apology for what I just did. Aura scrutinized the boy and, presumably thinking that this little boy would not lie, handed him her phone. Nigel took her mobile phone, quickly logged in to Aura's mobile account with his spare mobile phone, and synced all her messages. Once finished, he deleted the verification information in Aura's phone and logged into the Wi-Fi he just changed the password for. Nigel moved quickly, and coupled with his young age, Aura was completely unaware. She took the cell phone he handed back to her and smiled arrogantly. Okay, I forgive you. Nigel returned her gaze and smiled crookedly. Pretty auntie, you're so kind. Pleased with his compliment, Aura finally left satisfied. After she left, and quickly closed the door and forced Nigel to the corner and questioned him. Why did you rub salt into her wound? And the last time she was in the restaurant, you were the one that made it so that she couldn't get out of the bathroom, right? Do you have something against her? Nigel changed into a more comfortable position and leaned on the small bed. Guess. That night, after Luna coaxed Nellie to sleep, she secretly went out to call Nigel. Fine. I know you're taking care of Nellie, so I didn't bother you. On the other end of the phone, Nigel sounded level-headed and relaxed. I'm fine with Godmother. You and Nellie. He remembered what he had read in Aura's phone before her conversation with her friend. The little boy sighed. Be careful over there. That mistress isn't a good person. Although he could clearly monitor the contents of Aura's phone, her entire life was not written on her phone, and he could not control everything. I know. Luna sighed. While you live at Godmother's house, don't cause trouble for her, do you hear me? I know, I'm not a kid anymore. Nigel rolled his eyes. The nurses in Godmother's hospital like me, so don't worry. His mature tone amused Luna, as he acted as if he was a little adult, smiling helplessly. After speaking with him a little more, she hung up the phone and went back to the villa. On the coffee table in the living room were fragments of wedding photos Aura had torn down during the day. She frowned. Almost instinctively, she sat on the sofa and carefully pieced the pieces together. Although she did not want to admit it, that was indeed the best memory she ever had. What a pity. Just as Luna was about to piece together one of the photos, a man's low, indifferent voice was heard from the stairs. What are you doing? She withdrew her hand abruptly and looked in the direction of the voice. Joshua was leaning on the stairs aloofly as his eyes stared at her hand coldly. She hurriedly lowered her head to seem as if she was admitting her mistake. I'm sorry. I saw these fragments on the coffee table. I guess you wanted to piece the photos together, so I just... The man frowned and strode toward her, taking away the photo fragments in her hand. Don't touch my belongings in the future. He carefully placed the fragments on the tabletop. Don't think this will please me. Luna narrowed her eyes slightly, apologizing, but the corners of her lips lifted, pleased. She wanted Joshua to feel that she had ill intentions toward him. Only then would he not doubt her true identity. I'll be taking my leave now, Mr. Lynch. With that, she turned around to head upstairs. Nellie. Joshua sat down on the sofa and leaned back gracefully. Was she all right today? The little girl asked him to hang up his and her mother's wedding photo yesterday, yet Aura destroyed it. She must have been sad, was she not? Not really. Luna turned her back to Joshua, her lips twitching slightly. Mr. Lynch, you seem to be really fond of your daughter. The man raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at her retreating figure, waiting for her to continue. Her lips turned into a small smile. I didn't see a picture of your ex-wife at home before. Yet there are lots of them all of a sudden. You must have done it to please the little princess, right? The words of the woman caused Joshua to narrow his eyes slightly. He stared at her indifferently. You seem to care a lot about my wife and me, don't you? Certainly. Luna smiled. My purpose in coming here is to revere you. So it's only natural I'd be curious about your relationship. Joshua gave a cold snort. Of course. It was true that this woman came to be a maid, because she harbored intentions toward him. He glanced at Luna coldly. Remember, you are just a servant. Don't say what you shouldn't say. Don't do what you shouldn't do. This position beside me can't be filled by just anyone who wants it. Chapter 17. Luna was unfazed at the man's cold gaze as she nodded lightly. Understood. She then headed upstairs. But she paused just as she reached the top. Ms. Gibson came to the house early this morning and smashed the photos. Ms. Nellie was unhappy all day. If you can't handle your relationship with Ms. Gibson, don't just fulfill Nellie's request. Then there won't be a situation where both women are unhappy. Joshua looked at her back that faced him, his voice colder than the surrounding air as he uttered, "Are you trying to teach me how I should handle my affairs?" "It's just a suggestion." Luna's voice was calm and emotionless. "After all, if Ms. Nellie is always unhappy, it will only increase my workload." With that, she raised her feet and headed upstairs, leaving behind nothing but an indifferent back view. The man sat on the sofa and frowned at her retreating form. Early the next morning, Aura received a call from Lucas before she even woke up. "Ms. Gibson, I'm downstairs. Mr. Lynch told me to come and pick you up. He wants to see you." "Joshua wants to see me?" Aura jumped out of her bed in excitement. It was the first time throughout the years Joshua approached her early in the morning. "1 minute. I'll be downstairs after I put on some makeup." An hour later, Aura, with a delicate layer of makeup on her face and a long dress wrapped around her frame, stepped out and opened the car door elegantly. In the back seat of the car, Joshua, dressed in black, sat with closed eyes as he rested. When she got into the car, she was so surprised that her voice trembled. "Joshua, I didn't expect you to come personally." The man interrupted her calmly. "Lucas, go to the restaurant." At the restaurant, Joshua lowered his head as he, eating his breakfast, began lightly. "In half a month, I plan to take you to Grandma's birthday party. After all, you've lived as my fiancé for 6 years. It's time for a change of your status." Aura's eyes lit up. Sure enough, Joshua came to her early in the morning because he had good news to announce. She was inwardly delighted, yet she maintained a shy disposition. "I don't mind." "I do." Joshua merely looked up at her indifferently. "I'll announce on the day of my grandma's birthday party that our engagement is over." Clang! Aura's fork suddenly fell on the table as she gawked at Joshua in shock. "Joshua, what do you mean?" Joshua ate his breakfast gracefully. "I promised to maintain my relationship with you as an unmarried couple. Firstly, to fulfill Luna Gibson's last wish. Second, once she died, we would have nothing to do with each other. So you needed another identity for me to protect you. I also said at the beginning that if you and I meet someone we love in the future, this ridiculous engagement can be terminated at any time." Aura bit her lip firmly. "But Joshua, neither you nor I met the person we love." "But Nellie came back." Joshua put down his knife and fork and looked at Aura's face indifferently. "Nellie's existence proves that Luna Gibson didn't die 6 years ago. Since my wife is still alive, I shouldn't maintain this relationship with you. Besides," the man lowered his head to drink his soup, "you don't get along well with Nellie. The servant said yesterday that you made Nellie unhappy all day. So this contract ends here." He put down the empty bowl. "On Grandma's birthday, I'll announce Nellie's identity first, and then announce the dissolution of our engagement." With that, he got up and strode away. Aura remained at her seat, her hands clenched into fists. Seeing Joshua's car leaving mercilessly, Aura finally broke down and swept all the tableware on the table to the ground. Crash! Shing! Clang! She was under the impression she was in for a beautiful start when he asked to meet her early in the morning. But he suddenly wanted to break their engagement, because of Nellie, that little brat. The woman's eyes narrowed angrily. It was all the little brat's fault. Joshua would not treat her like this if she did not come back. She had just returned for 3 days, and Joshua no longer wanted her. If she did not get rid of that little brat, she was no Aura Gibson. Luna Gibson did not dare to show up by herself, and instead sent a little girl like her as a sacrificial lamb. So be it. Noon. Aura carried a lunchbox into the Lynch Group building. When she entered Joshua's office, he had just finished his morning meeting. The man frowned. "What are you doing here?" Aura smiled and put down the lunchbox. "To bring you food, brother-in-law." The term startled Joshua. He frowned. "Why are you calling me that?" "Since my sister is still alive and our engagement will be dissolved soon, I'll address you as brother-in-law from now on." just like before. Aura smiled and passed the food to Joshua. After our talk in the morning, I thought about it a lot. You're right. I haven't been fulfilling my responsibility recently. Even if we end our engagement, you will be my brother-in-law, and Nellie will be my niece, right? Joshua nodded. It's only a pity that Nellie doesn't like me. The woman sighed and graciously handed the fork to Joshua. Brother-in-law, I'd like to take Nellie out tomorrow afternoon for a bonding session. After all, we'll all be a family in the future. I hope Nellie won't hate me so much, Aura said sincerely. Joshua hesitated for a while then nodded. That was good. Judging from Aura's attitude, she was regretting her actions. She and Nellie, one of them was Luna Gibson's sister, and the other was her daughter. They should not be in conflict in the first place. Thank you, brother-in-law. Malice twinkled momentarily in her eyes. I'll go make preparations then. At dinner, Joshua told Nellie of his decision. I don't want to hang out with her. Nellie rolled her eyes, her expression full of aversion. She's so fierce. Joshua sighed lightly. Nellie, she is your aunt after all. If Luna Gibson was there, she would be reluctant to see Nellie and Aura bicker and fight, would she not? In Luna's eyes, however, his kindness held a different meaning. Aura hurt Nellie again and again, but Joshua still tried to persuade Nellie to bond with her. In this man's heart, she did not know how important Nellie was, but she knew that Aura should be the most important one to him. Sadness surged in her chest. Luna! The man's sudden call to her pulled her out of her thoughts. He glanced at her calmly. You'll go with Nellie tomorrow. I'll also send a few extra guards to follow you. Luna sighed. Do I have to? This isn't something you as a servant should care about. You just need to take good care of Nellie. Yes, sir. After dinner, Nellie went back to her room and rolled over on her bed. I don't want to bond with that woman. I only have that much love, and after giving it to Mommy, I can't give it to others anymore. Her disposition amused Luna, and as she comforted her, she texted Nigel. It had been another day that she had not seen her son, and she missed the brat. Mommy, don't go to Aura's date tomorrow. Looking at the contents of Aura's phone synced on the tablet, it was clearly titled, Kill the Bee ***. Although there was no specific plan, a chill grew in his chest as he read the title. Mommy, don't go, do you understand? Chapter 18. Luna frowned. Why? That woman has bad intentions. The emotional Neil responded quickly. Mommy, I can't explain it to you how I found out exactly, but it's blatant she wants to hurt Nellie. Don't go out with her tomorrow. Luna sighed. Neil, what you can think of, I can think of as well, but you have to know that I'm powerless. I can't decide for Nellie. Joshua had always been on guard for Aura. If Luna prevented Nellie and Aura from bonding, Joshua's suspicion over her would heighten. She only had very little power to protect Nellie with her given status, which was why she was enraged when Neil sent Nellie to Joshua. She took a deep breath. Don't worry. I'll do my best to protect Nellie. After all, the amusement park was also a crowded place. In public, with herself and the bodyguards that Joshua sent, Aura could never do as she pleased. But Neil was well aware of his mother's situation. He pursed his lips, his voice sullen. I shouldn't have asked Nellie to reunite with Joshua Lynch. He only wanted Nellie to act as a fly on the wall for Mommy so Mommy could complete her plan as soon as possible. But he did not expect that Aura would try so desperately to attack a 6-year-old girl. Let's not talk about this. Luna sighed. Mommy can't take care of you now. You have to get along with your godmother. Do you hear me? Okay. Neil's voice was dull. I'll hang up then, Mommy. And the woman frowned. Be good. Don't cook up any more plans regarding Aura and Joshua anymore. Do you hear me? All right. Early the next morning, Aura arrived at Blue Bay Villa. Because of Joshua's orders, the bodyguard stopped her outside the door. Standing in the courtyard outside the villa, Aura smiled and called out Nellie's name. Nellie, come out. I'm taking you out for some fun. Nellie. In the children's room upstairs, Nellie sat in front of the small mirror and watched Luna comb her hair, lips flat in dissatisfaction. I don't want such an aunt at all. I hate her. I hate her so much. The little girl continued to mutter. Why did Daddy ask me to hang out with her? I told him I don't like her, yet he's still making me go out with her. Luna's hand that combed her hair slowly paused. Aura is the person your father likes, and will be your father's wife in the future. Remember what I told you before? You can't keep telling someone that you hate something when that person likes it. The same goes for people. Nellie flattened her lips, her grievance written all over her face. I'm just venting to you. From now on you shouldn't. Okay. The little girl pursed her lips unhappily, but did not press on the matter. In the courtyard outside the villa, the woman continued to yell, Nellie, it's time to go. Aura was not a very patient woman. In just half an hour, she had asked the servants to come in, and rushed them more than a dozen times while she kept shouting outside. Downright annoyed, Nellie did not even have her breakfast as she pulled Luna out. Nellie! When Luna and Nellie went out, Aura was still standing in the yard, looking in the direction of the children's room upstairs. I'll take you to the amusement park, Nellie. We'll have a lot of fun. Let's go. Your father is busy, and your mother is a scaredy cat and didn't dare come back. So as your aunt, I have to take on the task of being a parent and take you out to play. Stop shouting. Nellie stood at the door of the villa with a cold expression. You're so noisy. A cold look of indifference flashed through Aura's eyes before it vanished. She walked toward her, her eyes full of tenderness, and pulled Nellie's small body into her arms. I was afraid you were still asleep. She looked at Nellie's clothes and pigtails. You look so good today. Her voice was genial, her actions were gentle, and even her eyes looked extremely kind, but all that faux gentleness made Nellie shudder slightly. She turned her head and glanced at Luna subconsciously. Her mother smiled at her and motioned for her to calm down. Let's get in the car. Noticing the look Nellie and Luna shared, Aura placed Nellie in the back seat of the car unhappily. Luna raised her legs to get into the car too. You think you can sit in this car? Aura snorted coldly and raised her hand to stop Luna. You're just a nanny. Don't think too much of yourself. Just take a car with those bodyguards. Don't disturb me from bonding with Nellie. Luna frowned. Nellie didn't eat breakfast, and I have bread in my bag. I can serve her the food. I can too. Aura snatched the bag out of Luna's hand, ducked into the car, and closed the door. Get into the other car. Luna had no choice but to give Nellie a meaningful stare before she got into the car behind. The car started their journey. Luna sat between a few security guards and put on her headphones. She had long predicted that Aura would cause trouble again, so she purposely made modifications to the necklace Nellie was wearing. Aura's mean voice came from the other end of the headphones. Nellie, can you tell me where your mother is, please? Nellie, did your mother teach you to be so hostile to me? Why didn't she come back? She asked you, a little girl, to come back because she wanted to use you to please your father, so she can sit back and reap the benefits? You're only 6 years old, and it's so pitiful to be used by your mother like this. Nellie remained stoic the entire ride, no matter what Aura spoke, and it was not long until the cars arrived at the amusement park. The amusement park was overcrowded on weekends, but Luna felt rather relieved at the sight. The more people there were, the safer it was. With a fake smile on her face, Aura began to buy tickets for Nellie and showed her the various rides and shows available. With Luna's advice beforehand, Nellie rejected all the games with a high-risk factor on the pretense that she was afraid. The dissatisfied Aura could say nothing. As they stood before the Ferris wheel, however, Nellie could not leave. The little girl raised her head and looked at the Ferris wheel with longing eyes. Can I take this ride? Sure. A trace of joy passed through Aura's eyes. She quickly ordered the bodyguard next to her. Go buy tickets for the little princess, 2 tickets. After the bodyguard bought the tickets, she turned her head and looked at Luna with a smile. You've been worried about every little thing all morning, making it seem like I'm going to kill Nellie. With that, the woman changed into a comfortable position and sat on the chair. Please accompany her on the Ferris wheel while I rest. Besides, you'll be all suspicious otherwise. Luna frowned and instinctively felt that something was wrong with Aura's behavior. But before she had time to contemplate her purpose, Nellie excitedly took her hand and rushed toward the Ferris wheel. Auntie, Nellie wanted to ride the Ferris wheel with you all day. She knew that Mommy liked the Ferris wheel very much, but while they were living abroad, she was too busy and had no time to rest and relax. This was their chance. The little girl excitedly grabbed Luna and ran over, stamped their tickets, and took a seat. I'm so happy. Luna had no choice but to take a seat beside her. The Ferris wheel started to rotate. Aura changed into a more comfortable posture and leaned back on the chair. coldly glancing at the people around her. Is everything arranged? Yes, ma'am. The woman smiled triumphantly. They liked the Ferris wheel, did they? Well, she would make them stay on it forever. Chapter 19. Mommy, it's so romantic. As she sat in the car of the Ferris wheel, Nellie knelt on a chair and gazed at the panoramic view of the entire amusement park. She clapped excitedly. I didn't know the amusement park was so huge. The little girl who rode on the Ferris wheel for the first time danced around happily. When we rise higher, others in the amusement park will become smaller than ants. Luna sat next to her and patted her back lightly, her heart riddled with emotions. Her 3 children had suffered a lot with her, especially Nellie. She was well-behaved and sensible, and if she was not born in such a family, she would be a little princess that everyone doted on. Her first visit to the amusement park would not be when she was 6 years old. She would not be targeted by someone like Aura. Sadness rose to Luna's throat at those thoughts. She took a deep breath, raised her hand to hold Nellie in her arms, and buried her head in the little girl's neck. Mommy promises you that when this matter is over, I'll accompany you as much as you want in the future, okay? Nellie turned her head as her clear eyes bore into Luna's earnestly. Nigel's illness will also get better, won't it? Luna nodded solemnly. Yeah, Mommy. Nellie stretched out her small hands and hugged Luna in excitement. When the mother and daughter pair hugged, the car they were in rose to the highest point of the Ferris wheel. Crack! With a loud noise, the car of the Ferris wheel began to rumble and sway side to side. Nellie failed to grasp the handrail as she rolled to the floor, her small body unable to withstand the ferocity of the tremors. Seeing her in such a state, Luna was so frightened that her heart nearly jumped out of her chest. She instinctively stretched out her hand and held Nellie tightly in her arms. Don't be scared. Despite holding onto the handrail with all her strength, the 2 of them still shook back and forth by the car, and it was only after a while that the Ferris wheel finally stopped moving. Still, the car was tilted. As the entire car was tilted on its axis, the door was below them, and the car door swayed, as if it would break away at any time. If the door broke, when their strength would eventually be depleted, she would lose her grip, and they would fall out of the tilted car. Nellie trembled in fear in her arms. Luna's eyes were glazed in ice. So this was Aura's plan. She thought that, at most, Aura only wanted to hurt Nellie, teach her a lesson and get back at her. She did not expect Aura would go as far as killing her and Nellie. Luna's heart tightened fiercely at the thought. She gritted her teeth, slipped out the sturdiest backpack strap, and fashioned it into a safety belt. She tied Nellie to the window bars while she used her clothes as a rope and tied it to her wrist. Mommy! Her voice sounded frail as if she was on the verge of tears. We won't fall, would we? It's all my fault. I shouldn't have brought you to ride the Ferris wheel. Mommy, I'm scared. We'll be fine. Luna patted Nellie's back gently and took out her phone with a trembling hand. No signal. She gripped her phone tightly, her fingertips blue and white from the lack of blood circulation. Once again, she underestimated Aura's ruthlessness and Joshua's fondness for her sister. Boom! With a loud noise, the car door at Luna's feet broke off and fell into the air. At a height of 100 meters, all they could see was a black shadow hurtling in the air when the door fell. Mommy! Nellie burst into tears, unable to hold herself back. She would have plunged down had her mommy not tied her up. Luna took a deep breath as she tried to comfort her. But even as she organized her words, nothing came out in the end. Her mind was blank. At that moment, the crowd in the amusement park was in an uproar. Someone is trapped up there. The door of the car has fallen off. The people inside won't fall down, right? If they fall from such a high altitude, they'll turn into meatloaf. Listening to the voices of those around her, Aura changed into a more comfortable position and leaned back on the chair. She turned her head and glanced at the bodyguard next to her. Let's call Joshua. Just say that it was the maid Luna who insisted on riding the Ferris wheel with Nellie, and this accident happened. The bodyguard hesitated, but Aura rolled her eyes at him. But what? Do you think that woman will survive? The truth will be whatever we say it is. Also, tell the amusement park staff to fake the rescue. The Ferris wheel will be repaired after they fall and die. Yes, ma'am. After the bodyguard left, Aura fanned herself with a fan leisurely and looked in the direction of the Ferris wheel with a cold smile on her lips. Luna, Did you think you could challenge me by sending a little girl like her? It was a mistake to keep the little B** starred. Now that you sent her back yourself, don't blame me for not giving you a chance. Mommy, Nellie. On the Ferris wheel, a boy's calm voice drifted out of the necklace around Nellie's neck. Nigel. Luna's eyes widened. It's me. I modified Nellie's necklace. The signal is strengthened, so that the three of us can talk through the necklace in case of an emergency. The voice of the little boy on the phone was very steady. I hacked into the surveillance system of the amusement park, and I can see you now. Far away on the other side of the ocean, the thin and pale little boy sat on the hospital bed, as his eyes fixed on the computer screen divided into several frames in front of him. Neil and I have been keeping in touch. He left for the control room the moment you had an accident. It shouldn't take 5 minutes until you're stabilized, so hold on. Luna bit her lip and was touched. Baby, you worked hard. Nigel was silent for a while. Mommy, you returned home because of me. I told you a long time ago that I don't care if I can live for a few more years. But you insist on going back. If something happens to you. Luna felt a pang in her chest as she listened to her son's voice. Don't say that. Nigel. Nellie was weak from crying. She hung limply on the window by the strap of the backpack, but her voice was very firm. It's all my fault, not yours, Nigel. I don't regret coming back to help you. I just regret bringing Mommy here. Oh, let's not do this right now, all right? Neil's panting voice came from inside the necklace. Nigel, I'm in the master control room now. Which side controls the Ferris wheel? Hearing Neil's voice, Nigel recollected himself and continued to guide him calmly. Left. The two people inside are watching the video loudly. The door is locked and you can't get in. But at the corner of the stairs, there are two security guards chatting with each other. Got it. Neil took a deep breath, put down the necklace, took out a stack of red tickets from his pocket, and ran to the stairs quickly. Hello. Would you like to get promoted and make a fortune? Chapter 20. Skreek. There was a deafening squeal of brakes. The black Maserati drove into the amusement park through the special passageway. The car door was flung open, and the tall man got out of the car quickly. Brother-in-law. The teary-eyed Aura ran toward Joshua when he got out, and she flung herself into his arms. What should I do? Nellie is still in it. It's all my fault. I shouldn't let that maid bring Nellie up there. I told them that the Ferris wheel was dangerous, but the maid didn't listen at all. To please Nellie, she had to follow her wishes. Joshua was confused, unable to tell whether Aura's words were true or false. How long have they been up there? It's been 10 minutes. Aura wiped her tears, so much in grief that she seemed out of breath. I can't live with myself if something happened to Nellie today. If I knew she'd be in danger, I would have gone up even though I wasn't feeling well. If the person with Nellie was me, I wouldn't feel so unhappy and guilty. That's enough. Joshua scrunched his eyebrows, irritated by Aura's crying. Did the staff in the amusement park repair it? They've been repairing it since the accident happened, but they don't know what went wrong. Aura pointed to the maintenance staff under the Ferris wheel. How could such a thing happen? Joshua raised his head and noticed that the specific car without its door was still tilted in midair. Joshua's brows screwed tightly together. At such a sharp angle, the people inside might not be able to hold on for long. At the thought that Nellie was still in that car, the man's heart sank to the pit of his stomach. Although it had not been long since they met each other, he knew what a delicate little girl Nellie was. How could she withstand such torture? Worry and anxiety flooded the man's eyes. Lucas. He took off his jacket and threw it on the ground. I'll go up first. Go to the control room to see what's going on. Aura's eyes widened in shock. Joshua, are you going up? She waited for so long, only to have both of them still hanging on and Joshua heading up? That must not happen. Aura rushed quickly and grabbed Joshua's arm. Joshua, it's too dangerous. Technical issues should be left to the professionals. Let's not take risks. Joshua turned his head and swept his gaze across Aura's face indifferently. I lost Luna once. He was in South City when Luna was trapped in the accident. He had missed his last opportunity. God had given him another chance by giving him Nellie. So how could he stand and do nothing? With this thought, he shook off Aura's grip and strode toward the direction of the Ferris wheel. Joshua. Aura stood and watched the man's retreating back, stomping her foot in anger. The tall man got under the Ferris wheel and after explaining his intention to the staff, he put on his safety harness and started to climb toward the topmost car. Standing in the distance, Aura stared at his back and bit her lower lip firmly. "Ms. Gibson." The bodyguard on the side finally realized the seriousness of the matter. "Should we give up?" The woman turned her head and stared at him coldly. "Do you think we can give up now?" Her plan was foolproof. She just did not expect that Luna and Nellie would be able to hang on for so long. The door of the Ferris wheel car was gone, and the car was tilted. Any normal person standing at such an angle would be exhausted in less than 10 minutes. How could they hold on for so long? "We can't let them down." Aura squeezed her hands into fists tightly on her side. "We can't let them down." She had already pushed all the blame onto Luna in front of Joshua, and she would not allow them to come down like this. Even if Joshua climbed up to rescue them himself, she could not let them down just because she was worried about Joshua. "Tell them." The woman inhaled deeply. "Only repair it when they fall. They might just lose their grip at the next second." In the master control room, Neil sat in front of the computer and studied the code symbols running on the computer. "Nigel, have you cracked it yet?" he asked, worried. Although he could also break through several simple firewalls, he still depended on Nigel when he encountered anything highly technical. "Soon." Nigel's voice on the other end of the phone was calm and composed. "The system has been deciphered, but I haven't dealt with the control of amusement park facilities before. I'm looking for a method." Far away in the hospital ward on the other side of the ocean, the little boy sitting on the hospital bed read through the guidebook urgently, glancing at Luna and Nellie from the corner of his eye. Vaguely, he saw someone braving the danger as he climbed on the metal frame of the Ferris wheel. He looked tall and neat, wearing black trousers and a white shirt. He did not look like a professional, but his movements were quick and nimble. In a moment, he was close to the car where Nellie and Luna were trapped. "Neil." The little boy frowned. "Who's that man?" Neil glanced at the screen in the surveillance camera and snorted coldly. "He's our scumbag father." Nigel's thin lips were slightly pursed. This person was his father? Afraid that Nigel would be distracted, Neil promptly reminded him. "Nigel, ignore him and hurry up, okay?" "All right." Nigel regained his focus, typed in a command, took control of the Ferris wheel, and slowly adjusted the tilt angle of the car until it was level. In the car, Luna, whose nerves had been strung tight, let out a long sigh of relief. "Nellie, look. We won't fall." She embraced Nellie's small body excitedly. The little girl in her arms did not react at all. A bad premonition surged in her chest.